Hey, what's happening, y'all? So it has been yet another while. Um, yeah, it's been busy over here. I've been hard at work on my next album, on the next Matt Hellion album titled Lights, um, and just life and working on guitars and keeping a little boy alive. Um, but Lights is nearing completion. So 7 of the 9 originals have been written, recorded, and mixed, just ready for mastering. And the last two instruments are done, recording. It is time for vocals. And one of them I've done some vocals on, but want to get a guest vocalist. I'm talking to a friend of mine, Clayton, to sing with me on this one. So we'll see what happens there. And then the other one, well, you might can hear I'm a little nasally right now. So, we got another round of sickness. It's one thing they don't warn you about with having a kid is how much you will get sick. Which it makes sense if I thought about it. The kids in daycare around who knows how many kids, and at his age, like they just they don't understand. They don't know quarantine. They put everything in their mouths or stuff. So they bring it home, and not only are they sick, and you got to take care of them and miss work and stuff, but then you get it because you're taking care of them, and then your spouse gets it, and you end up in this round and round we go. But it's all good. Such is life. But I'm dealing with another round of stuff. I got sick. Let's see, it's Thursday. Got it spiked a fever Sunday night, pretty bad one, and then by Monday midday, my fever was down to low grade. By Tuesday, it was gone. So that part was pretty fast moving. Now it's just this residual gunk, and I hate it. But that means I can't record vocals today. So trying to think of another project I could do, something else I could come up with, and I am planning on doing some supporting covers for this album, and I had the idea of why not talk about my process of recording a cover song or producing a cover song, and yeah, it was something. I actually got the idea from a Rhett Shull video where he was talking about more musicians, more creators need to talk about the process, talk about our process, and share with the world. Just if for no other reason than posterity, but maybe I'll get something from it. You know, maybe you will, maybe you won't. I hope you do. But yeah, that's my idea for this video is to just kind of talk about my process and kind of go over stuff and just share. And yes, I'm in Pro Tools. I haven't done a video on this yet, so I will just go ahead and talk about it. I do use Reaper periodically, but there's still some workflows that I haven't figured out in that software. Some of the stuff in what I'm going to talk about in this video specifically, I think about trying to figure out how to do in Reaper, and I go, nope, 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 all the nopes, nope. And I'm a little bit more comfortable. Like I stand by a lot of my criticisms from my earlier videos. I do think not such positive things about Avid as a company. I do like Pro Tools as a software, despite its issues, mainly just due to comfortability. And because they backed down on their whole subscription only thing and have allowed and have maintained perpetual licenses, I feel okay about it. That was my biggest complaint is I don't like forcing subscriptions, especially when you're not providing constant and consistent value for that subscription. But they went back, they reinstated perpetual licenses, and they even streamlined that a little bit so that There's no longer a difference between maintaining your license and just reinstating a lapsed license. So either way you go, it's $200, and that kind of makes things even easier for people like me, where it's I want perpetual, and I want to be able to update my software when I need it, right? I don't want to have to pay $100 a year to maintain software, but I should be able to use my software until something changes. There's a firmware update that makes things less stable, or like what happened last time. Uh, I like to use mix control on the iPad, so I've got my mixing console, my analog console here, and then I've got like a control surface over here. Um, and my iPad, and the version of mix control there, and my Pro Tools version, none of that was compatible. And my wife was wanting to get an iPad, so we updated iPads, and that way I was able to get the newest version of mix control, and then updated Pro Tools so everything was compatible, and so that has allowed everything to sync back up. And so I did that. And then I'm not going to pay for it again until I need to. And that's kind of how that's how I like it to be structured, right? Use my software, I own the software, I use it as I need to. I don't have to worry about a license suddenly failing. And if there's a technical issue, and or there's new features or anything like that, I can re-up at a reduced rate. Um, Price is still high, but it's more in line with what I believe is right. Anyway, that's a whole other aside. But yeah, if you know of a tutorial, or or just know personally how to do some of this stuff in Reaper or Studio One or whatever, uh, drop a comment and fill me in, because yeah, thinking about trying to do some of what I'm going to talk about in Reaper just scared me. So I've got a session here made for cover demo for this video. So I've got a blank session. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import the audio from the original song. Let's see. Audio files. There it is. All right. So I'm covering Seek and Destroy by Metallica off their first album, Kill 'Em All. I'm just going to say use current folder. And so now it's taking, and I had already had that saved and imported on a different session, so I'm just using those files. All right, and bring that into a new track. And it's adding the little .1 because I've already done this before. Okay. And so next thing I'm going to need is I'm going to need a stereo instrument track. I'm going to name it Midi Drums. Okay. On that instrument track, I'm going to put Steven Slate Drum Sampler 5, and I'm going to load a kit that I custom built, that I switched things out on and tuned a little bit for one of the songs on the new album. Now, when I'm mixing drums, I do like to put everything out into mono audio channels and, mono and stereo into audio channels. But for the drafting part, for this initial section, that's not going to work too well. So I'm going to move all these back. I guess I could go and make a, probably do this and then save that as a preset. But that would be smart. And I'm not always smart. Sometimes I'm smart. But what was it my redneck uncle used to say? Even a blind frog shits twice a day. I have no idea what that means, but it seems like it's relevant. All right, so I think we're mostly ready to kind of start this process. So I've already kind of started this, but one of the first things I'll do is kind of adjust this out a little bit, and then I'll play it and do a tap tempo to get a rough idea of the tempo. So we're hovering pretty steadily at like 140, 142. So we've got kind of a rough tempo here. I'm going to switch to slip mode, kind of try and line that up a little bit. So you can even see, like, just from the start, like, the two guitar parts aren't even coming in together. It's part of what gives this such a dynamic feel to it. But as we look through and we start looking, like, where the drums come in, you can see there's a lot of fluctuation in tempo all throughout the song. It's, even though we've gotten a rough, and we can even, like, drag this to where it's closer, but you can see, like, okay, we're already getting off there, and jump further down the line. There's just a lot of ebb and flow to this. But the downside is when you're a lone creator like me and you're trying to cover something like this, I don't have the privilege of having a band that I can bring into a room and jam with me and um, just make it work. And bring this down. There we go. So I need something a little bit more regular, a little bit more predictable. And I need to be able to edit on the fly and know what's going on. And most importantly, I want to be able to control those tempos and control that song structure while still being able to use this as a reference from what I'm creating to see if what I'm doing does or doesn't work. Am I being deliberately different in order to be more creative? Or am I being so derivative that I'm losing the essence of the song? Like, these are all things that are going through my head, and I've got to restructure this so that I can make those decisions better. Now, one of the best ways I found to do this is through bar beat marker generation. Now, there's a quick way to do this in Pro Tools and a slow, tedious way to do this in Pro Tools. Sometimes the quick way works, sometimes it doesn't. And it's going to work better in situations where you don't have a single stereo audio mastered file like this. So under the event menu, there's the beat detective. And you can see all these white lines are what it's detecting as beats. So if you had like a drum stem, a stereo drum stem, or even if you're doing this off of, if you had a multi-track drum kit and were able to just use the kick and snare tracks to do this, it would work a lot better. Because this is already recorded and mixed and mastered and everything's pretty squished, it's really hard for Beat Detective to accurately find stuff. So I could, find a setting that I think is okay, and then click generate, and it'll put the bar beat markers up here. And then I could edit that and try and make it work. But honestly, I'm still going to end up adding individual markers all through this, and I'm going to have a whole lot of BS markers to sort through. So I don't think that works in this case. Some cases it does, not this one. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to switch to grid mode with a quarter note grid. And I'm going to go to beat 1, measure 3, and it's going to say Control I. And it's going to bring up this thing where I can make sure I'm putting it exactly on beat 1 to measure 3. Right? And then I've got that bar beat marker generated there. And I'm going to drag this to where I think beat 1 should be. And you see it's kind of roughly saying what the tempo should be. And then I'm going to move forward. I know just from working on this that this riff in particular is the downbeat is predictable every 2 measures. So I'm going to put another marker on measure 5. I'm going to listen. All right, that dump dump. That's where the downbeat should be, right there. All right, now I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to do the same thing. All right, it's a little early, back that. All right, now we've got drums to look at, so that gives us an even better way to evaluate this. All right. Now we can go through and do every measure, every 2 measures, just whatever's most gets us the most accurate result. All right. See, and you can see. Let me get a few of these in, and we'll show you like. Let's see. How much tempo fluctuation we actually have. And you can move through this pretty quick. I mean, it's slow and tedious, but it's not like an all-day affair, right? All right, and if we start, and now we start getting to some weirdness. All right. Yeah, this was something that really kind of weirded me out. This was a hard thing to... So where's the... Because I see that and I want it to be on 1. I just... Part of me just wants that to be exactly on 1. It feels like... Right? We're coming in... Dun 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 dun. But nope, it's on 2 and 4. It's on 2 and 4, and I have to remind myself that it's on 2 and 4 because I still see it and I want to put it on 1. Why are the drums coming in on 2 and 4? But I will agree, in the context of the song, 2 and 4 sounds good. I think Lars made a good choice there. It's just logistically, it makes the more regimented part of me want to scream. Okay, but we can look at this and we can see, right, tempo fluctuations even between like beat 4 and of measure 25 and beat 1 of measure 26. You got 136 to 139, 140. Let's see, there's a 140, 143, 140, 141. The tempo fluctuations are all over the place in this song. So the idea is that once I go through and I do the whole song like this, right? I go through and I identify the downbeats. Sometimes even like doing the beats 2, 3, and 4, or some of those. Just trying to get the tempo ruler to match the actual song structure as closely as I can. Maybe not exact, but fairly close, right? So once that's done, I can come to the end of the song and I can say I'm going to create a tempo marker. And I'm just going to say 140. Okay? So doing that changes all those bar beat markers that I had into tempo markers. And this is an important part, because then what I can do is I can change my audio file from being rendered in samples into being rendered in ticks. And I can tell it to use, whatever thing. I'm going to say polyphonic just because it's easy. And now I can look at this and I can go, all right, I want to start at 140 BPM, and I want to maintain that tempo until here, where I want to jump up to 142 BPM. And then I'm going to maintain that until here, where I want to drop down to 138 BPM. Right? So then I can create purposeful tempo changes. And what it's doing is, because I switched this to ticks and polyphonic audio, it is warping the audio to match what changes I've made. So bar beat marker lets me warp the tempo ruler to match the audio, and then changing it to tempo markers and doing ticks and setting a render method allows me to warp the audio to change my tempo ruler. Sounds a little convoluted. It is a little convoluted. But it allows me to basically put the song on a grid and then manipulate it almost like I would a Midi instrument, to where I can create, where it can be more stable so that I can play along with it, so that the things that I'm doing can line up more easier as I'm overdubbing, so that I can mute it and play along with my own parts and have everything still relatively line up. But then I can create these tempo changes to create a more human feel, is the idea. Because I want there to be tempo changes. Most of my music has tempo changes throughout it. But it's not measure by measure or beat by beat like it would be if you were playing live off the floor. It's section by section, right? I might go, well, I want the intro to be a little bit slower, because if I was playing with a group, we'd just be getting into it. I want the choruses to be a little faster, because at that point we're like really jamming, right? I'm just trying to think through organically. Sorry, my eye's itching. Trying to think through organically, what would a group of performing musicians do? What would feel natural in the context of the song? And so I create these deliberate tempo adjustments all throughout the song, and go through here and go, all right, well, this just needs to be, I think 210's a little fast. I'm going to do 205. That was not a 5, that was an 8. Not 5, 205. All right. Right, and so we're more regular there. Everything's lining up a little better. And so if you watch like Rick Beato videos where he's like, this is what this would sound like if it was all put to the grid. This is how he does it. I think. I mean, he might just be like straight up editing, but if you've got a good renderer, this seems like a much more efficient way to get that done. But anyway, so that's once I've got that all done, the next step for me is to jam with the track. So this is when I would record enable MIDI drums and get behind the kit and just play through it a few times and try and get a feel for it. Try and think through what I want to do exactly like the track, what I want to do a little bit differently, and proceed from there. And once I'm comfortable, I'll record a few takes. I'm not a great drummer. I'm not even a good drummer. I can carry a beat usually. So I end up with this weird situation where I've got to think about my time. And I've got a limited amount of time. I want to produce songs. Do I want to spend a week or two practicing the song in order to get it good enough that I can just record it? Or do I just need to record a take that is good enough? And because I'm recording via MIDI, do some editing and call it good. It depends on the track. So for some of my originals on the new album, I worked really hard to figure out a drum part that I could play and play well. That would require a very minimal amount of editing. And then there's other songs where I'm like, no, I want this to sound more complex. I want this to sound different from what I can realistically pull off. And then I will do my best and just edit. And I'm fully transparent about this. It may seem like a cop-out, but for me, I care more about the overall vision of the song that I'm creating and the end result than I care about those little differences, right? That's just me personally. Other people feel differently. It's all good. And I admire people who have the ability and the time to really just nail each and every part on each and every instrument. My strong suit is definitely guitar. That's where I shine. That's where I can usually just get solid takes. Some bass as well. I can do guitar and bass, but vocals take some finagling for me, and drums take some finagling for me. It just is what it is. But with that done, let's go ahead and jump to a different session where I've kind of already done a lot of this. Yeah, fine, we can save it. Why not? Check my phone, see if anyone's been hollering at me. Nope. All right. So this is where I'm at in my actual session file on this cover. So you can see I've already put markers all through the song for where the drums come in, where the drums enter onto, where there's riff changes, the verses, pre-chorus, chorus, all that stuff. So that's all there, and you can see my tempo changes. So I went through that process and decided this is where I want the tempo to change. And then I went through and recorded my drum take. So I've edited some of it, but not all of it. I think around here's where I stopped editing. Yeah, you can see the little ghost notes and stuff. That sounds a little hectic with their stuff. See, pretty rough. Not a great drummer. There's even one part, I think right here in the break, where so I do like a fill or whatever, and I stop drumming, and then I'm listening back, well, and realizing, wait, Lars is still going. Crap, what am I supposed to do here? I just had to figure something out. See, just putting my embarrassment out there for all the internet to see. Ugh, so rough. But I mean, I can carry a basic beat, you know? I can play a little bit. Where I go through and I can edit. And there's some issues here with the edit. Some of those hi-hat hits are not on the right piano roll note. It's all these right here. Now originally, I accidentally grabbed the wrong one. I originally left those there because I was thinking, hey, maybe it'll just sound a little bit different, you know, make it feel a little more human. No, it just sounds weird. And none of this stuff is lined up the way it should be. Okay. Oh, I think it's because this is kind of... Well, no. All right, whatever. So... One of the important things with editing, especially with the kit that I'm using, it only has one sensor for the kick. I've got a double kick on it, but if I want that feel of like a double kick, the SSD sampler does have a second sample for that second kick hit. So I just have to go through and actually manually drag that down. It's kind of a pain, but it's just a trade-off, a limitation of where we're at. And so you can see in the velocity ruler pretty clearly the parts that were edited, that were drawn in, versus the parts that were played organically. Because there's a lot of wild fluctuation. And part of me being an inexperienced drummer is, yes, those fluctuations are more human, but they're not exactly the ones that a real drummer would make. A real drummer would be much, much tighter. Like I can get through, but you can see like these really quiet hi-hat hits and like a quieter kick hit. That's not good. That's not what a real drummer would do. So in addition, so once I've gotten all that and I go through and I edit the whole thing. And I use the edit to basically part write and say, okay, like with this section in particular, I played it completely different from that, and then I started listening back and going, I played it more like what I did on the verses, just kind of the same beat. And I started listening back in the context of the original, going, Lars did something different there. What did he do? Okay, My version doesn't really gel with the riff. My version sounds chaotic and discordant, and or discordant's the wrong word for a rhythm instrument, but you know what I mean. It sounds out of place. I don't like it. So that's where I was able to go through and in the edit just fix it and go, okay, here's what it should be playing, right? And I can go through and I can do the whole thing, and I can use this editing process to part write. And once a part written, I can decide, okay, last chance. Do I feel like I can pull this off? And I just need to practice and I have time to practice? Or am I trying to get this track done because I've been working on this album for 5 years and I'm ready for it to be out? And I just need to go with the edit I've done. So these are the emotional struggles of the songwriter. Um, but it's just part of it. So once I've got the editing done, it is time to go through the humanization process. Because yes, I've edited things to the grid. I'm not going to leave them on the grid. Um, yes, my dynamics aren't good, but I'm not going to set everything at 121. There's a balance to be struck here, and I'll show you the process that I usually do. And we'll use this where drums enter as an example. So first thing, once I've gotten everything edited, excuse me, stupid drainage. Once I've gotten everything edited and I'm ready, I'm going to go to the quantize menu. I'm going to stick with the 16th note grid. And you think of quantizing as like taking chaotic notes and like locking them to the grid, right? That's usually what we think of. And I don't know if Reaper has anything similar to this, but in Pro Tools, you can use the same menu and say randomize. And you can introduce a percentage of randomization and apply that. And so now if I go into the Midi editor window and I look, you can see things are slightly off. So this is a way to humanize tracks. Now you do have to be careful because sometimes with stuff like this, I think that's 2 kicks, 2 snares. So sometimes an overlap will work okay and sound okay. Sometimes if you have notes overlapping each other, especially if it was the other way around, if this first D was back here overlapping this other one, it can actually mute that second note. In which case, if you wanted to keep it, you would need to drag it up to another note that plays a similar sample, right? Which will probably sound better, more human anyway. But that's the thing you just have to look out for when you're doing the randomization process. Is that's a thing, and it can really mess up a track if you don't know what you're doing, and if you're not going back and checking to make sure that the randomization actually did what you wanted it to. So you go through and you double check everything, make sure all the randomization worked, and that should give the playtime a little bit better feel. Okay. The next stage of that is to quantize velocity. And we're going to do a very similar thing. So this is a heavy hitting song. I'm going to set these all to. I'm going to start at. Hey, I'm trying to do a thing here. Set this to 105. For a metal song like 105, 110, it's kind of where I like to do the bass line. Because it's not the full 127 hitting every drum head as hard as the player can, but it's not. It's 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 still pretty hitting things pretty hard. So we'll say I'm gonna say 110 this time around, and we're gonna check the randomized box, and we're gonna add some randomization to that, and we'll hit apply. Right, and then we go back into our Midi editor window, and now we can look at our velocities, and everything's a lot more regular, but there's still variation, right? It's still more human than just if someone had just programmed this and left it, but less chaotic as when an inexperienced player performed it. So then we get something like. And in this process, you can do some different things. Like, what if I wanted this snare section to be a swell, right? So then I could grab that one, drag it down. Like, there's a fast way and a slow way to do everything. So the fast way is to highlight all those, change pencil mode to a line, and go. So you can do that with, and then the slow way is to just go note by note and placing them where you want. The line's going to be more exact. Doing it individually is going to introduce more variation. It's potentially going to feel slightly more human. So what's your priority? A more human feel or faster production? Everything in life is a balance. All right. So yeah, and other things like cymbal swells, you can do that with, or if you're doing like a tom build, stuff like that. So you go through and you would make the individual adjustments there to get that set up. All right, so now we've got like our overall template for stuff, but you can still do even more to increase the humanization, and that's by changing velocities based on section. So if we think about things, and just like we do at the tempo, right? Okay, well, at this part, if I was playing with the group would be playing really fast because it's intense. This part, we'd slow down a little bit, right? A drummer's dynamics are going to change with that too. So what you could do is you could say, all right, and I don't know if I'll do this in this song in particular, this is just for example, we could say the verse, pre-chorus, and chorus would all be played at different tempos, right? Or different tempos or different velocities with different dynamics. So we've got our baseline dynamic set, or baseline velocities. So what if we say, all right, our verse would be played a little softer. So we're going to highlight that section, go into our Midi editor, take our verse, and we're just going to drop it a little bit. All right, we're going to leave our pre-chorus there because we've already got it set at baseline, which we didn't. Here, how about this? I'm not going to save this, so we'll just do it. We'll change velocity. We'll do exactly the same settings I did on the other one. And now we're going to go in here. All right, and Midi editor. And we're going to drop this by 14 points. All right, we're going to leave the pre-chorus alone, and then the chorus, we will increase by 14 points. I'm just picking 14 just out of nowhere. You'll just need to adjust, listen, adjust to find out exactly what's going to fit for your vision of the song. So then we end up with these dynamics. See, so that's playing a little harder. And the chorus is playing the hardest. And you can even do something like, okay, well, that dynamics change would start and feel more accurate if it started with the fill before that section. Oh, that's a bad fill. Oh, that's so bad. It's so bad. Why am I embarrassing myself online like this? Same thing here, right? And so you make those adjustments and you make those creative decisions. You're creating this drum track that is programmed. It is MIDI drums, but making it feel as real as possible. Right? That's the goal that I go for. That's also why I go through the effort of actually playing on the MIDI drum kit, is to at least get a sense of what a drummer would play. Right? If you're programming all sorts of crazy stuff because you think it sounds cool, but you're not thinking about would a drummer or could a drummer actually play this, you end up with something that sounds fake. If everything's locked to the grid and there's no variation whatsoever, it's gonna sound fake. If there's no change in tempo, if everything's set at 120, if there's no change in velocity, everything is set at 127 and just hitting as hard as it possibly can because it's what you think sounds good, it's gonna sound fake. For some genres that works. In fact, in metal, a lot of times it can work. But there's something to that human feel. And a lot of us are in situations like I am where we've got a small room to make music in, and we don't have a full band to record. I mean, I know drummers in the area, and I'm sure Crystal would be happy to work with me on stuff, but then you talk about logistically, okay, how am I going to get her the tracks and hope that she has time to practice them and get the parts ready, show up with all of my mobile rig, mic up her drum kit. It becomes a logistical nightmare. So there's too many of us that are just in a situation where this is how we have to produce music. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that it has to sound like a robot. There are ways to create ebbs and flows and dynamics and that make it feel real. Or realer. I'm not gonna say totally real. There's a certain magic about a real drummer, a good drummer behind a real kit that is just next to impossible to capture in any other way. But we do our best. We do our best with what we've got. And so, yeah, this is kind of the biggest part of my process of making drums, especially for cover songs. Some cover songs are a lot easier. Some cover songs, the drummer already performed to a click, or is just that freaking tight that once they have a tempo locked in their brain, they do it. And I'm able to cut this process much shorter by just setting the initial tempo, making sure it goes all the way across fairly accurately, listening along with a click, and then I'll still switch from samples to ticks and set it to polyphonic audio. But then all I have to do is add the tempo changes I want to do, rather than this whole mess of deductive stuff that I had to do with, that I have to do with more organic live played field tracks. So I am going to stop or pause the recording here and get to work on this, and then we will come back to listen to to check out the finished product. Not the full cover, but the finished drum part. And once we get through that, we'll wrap up the video, and then I'll probably do a separate video for guitars. We'll just do this one just on drums. But anyway, I'm going to stop for right now, and we will be back shortly. And we are back. All right. I have done the thing. It took me a couple hours. It's kind of tedious, but yeah, got all the drums edited, made the adjustments I wanted to make, and then humanized everything. So, we can look and go into the Midi editor, and you can see there's slight variations, but everything's still really tight, with both the note on times and with the velocities. So a lot tighter than I could play it. And then I separated out into a few sections and, made like 10-point adjustments to that baseline velocity all through it. So why don't we just take a listen? We'll listen to a few sections like in context, and then we'll listen to larger sections without the original playing, because I'm already going to get copyright dinged for this. I don't need to make my appeal to YouTube. I don't need to make that case any more difficult. So, let's see. How about some of this pre-chorus? This chorus. Some of the break. Right, so a lot tighter, a lot better. That I could actually record the rest of the song to. So now let's go ahead and just mute that, and we'll just kind of start at the beginning and hear what we've done. All right. Little thing I need to fix over here. Really want those to be hi-hats in this ride section. And there. Cool. So that gives me my bass line drums thing that I'm going to build the rest of my version of this song around. And I'm not actually going to print this to audio tracks until like pretty late on, once I've gotten guitars tracked and things of that nature, so I can make adjustments to this. And then I'll print it into audio tracks and mix it just like I would a drum kit, because I like practicing all that stuff, and it's a good way to do that if you don't have access to an actual acoustic kit that you can mic up. Now, there's a lot of, I've seen creators out there talking about not doing that, specifically because these samples are designed to already sound good, so you shouldn't really have to do much to them, and that is true. That is absolutely true. However, that doesn't mean you can't EQ them and adjust the tone a little bit and maybe put a little compression, make them smack a little harder in certain places. You're just going to be a lot more light than you would with just regularly recorded instruments. But that's the thing we can talk about later on in the mixing process. Excuse me. And yeah, and doing it this way, it saves me from a lot of the mistakes that commonly happen when working with MIDI drums. Because I'm putting the whole thing down and I'm editing each thing, it's also preventing me from getting into copy paste land. You know, there's some little things that slip by every now and then. I heard at one point, a place I was supposed to have 2 kicks in a row just had the 1 kick. And little things like that, they're going to slip by that make it a little bit different. It makes it more like a normal performance, which is what I'm going for. Trying to get as human as possible while still using the convenience of MIDI. That's kind of my goal when it comes to doing the drums on these tunes. So yeah, that's about it. That's getting the drums down. So I think I'll call it for this video, and then once I get around to doing guitars for this, we can talk a little bit more about that. I can go through that process and talk about the miking stuff that I have set up in the amp closet, and the different equipment I use, and guitar selection. That's another big part of that. But we will save that for a different video and call it here. I hope this was useful. If not, I hope it was at least somewhat entertaining. And I hope this doesn't get me too bad of a copyright strike. Don't delete me, YouTube. But yeah, that's it for now. I appreciate you. Thanks for watching and hanging out with me. Make sure you leave a comment down below, and like, subscribe, all that mess. And I will see you next time. All right. Appreciate you. You're awesome. And have a good one.